Okay, you know that feeling? You're in a test, staring at a question, and something just feels off. Maybe it's confusing or tricky or just plain unfair. But what if I told you there's an actual science to finding and fixing those bad questions? A way to make tests truly fair? Well, there is, and we're going to dive right into it.
Right? That feeling is totally real, and it points to a massive challenge in education. How do we actually know if a test is doing its job? How can we be sure it's testing what you know and not just, your ability to decode a weirdly worded question or even just get lucky? So here's the core of the problem. For years and years, a lot of schools and universities have just been reusing these huge banks of test questions. They get rolled out over and over, but often without any real data-driven check to see if they're even fair or effective anymore. And that is a really big deal. Because when the questions themselves are flawed, the test stops being a good measure of a student's knowledge. The results get shaky, and it can actually hurt the very learning it's supposed to support. So how do we fix this mess? Well, the old way was pretty simple. Did the student get it right or wrong? But that doesn't tell you anything about the question. The new way, though, is like a deep dive analysis of every single question. It's not just about if a student got it right, it's about understanding how that question behaves and if it's truly doing what it's supposed to.
So how on earth do you grade a question? You use a really smart statistical tool. Think of it like a high-tech quality inspector that can give any test question a full diagnostic workup. It's called the 3PL IRT model, and honestly, it's a total game changer for making tests fair.
So what is this thing really? Well, instead of just counting right or wrong answers, the 3PL IRT model looks at the patterns across thousands of student responses to figure out three key things about any question: just how hard it is, how well it separates the students who get it from those who don't, and, this is a big one, how easy it is to just guess correctly.
So for every single question on a test, this model is basically asking three simple but incredibly powerful questions. First, difficulty. Is this question a piece of cake, or is it a real brain buster? Second, discrimination. Does getting this question right actually prove you know your stuff? And third, guessing. What are the odds someone could just luck out and nail this answer without knowing anything?
Now, this all sounds great in theory, but let's see how it works in the real world. For this, we're heading over to Vietnam, where researchers at the Cantor University of Medicine and Pharmacy put one of their old, trusted tests under this very powerful microscope.
All right, so here's the setup. The researchers took a 100-question multiple-choice test on cell structure. This was a test they'd been using for a long time. But here's the kicker. Nobody had ever done a scientific check to see if the questions were actually any good. So they gathered up the data from almost 1,300 students and let the 3PL IRT model do its thing. So what did this high-tech analysis have to say about this old test? Well, the results were pretty fascinating, and they gave the university a crystal-clear roadmap for what to do next. First, let's talk difficulty. As you can see, the huge majority of questions, almost 85%, landed in the easy or moderate zone. Now, you might think that's a bad thing, but it's not. It told the researchers the test was doing its job, which was to assess core foundational knowledge. So in difficulty, the test gets a big thumbs up. Next up, discrimination. This is maybe the most important part. Does a question actually separate the students who know the material from those who are struggling? And the results were fantastic. A whopping 97% of the questions were either average, good, or very good at this. That is a huge win for the test's quality.
But this is where it gets really interesting. The model flagged exactly 10 questions. And what was their problem? They were just too easy to guess. These were the weak links, the ones where a student could get it right by pure luck, not knowledge. And when you're talking about a medical school test, that's a problem you have to fix fast.
So what's the final verdict? The analysis showed that 87% of the questions were high quality and perfectly suitable. The test was, for the most part, really solid, but the model gave them a laser-focused list of the exact questions that needed to be either fixed or thrown out. That is how you build a reliable test, not with guesswork, but with data. And of course, this is about so much more than just one biology test in Vietnam. This whole case study is basically a blueprint for how we can make testing better everywhere, more precise, more effective, and just fundamentally more fair. The researchers themselves put it perfectly. They said this kind of analysis is absolutely crucial for making sure our tests are both valid, meaning they test what they're supposed to test, and fair to every student. It's about moving from this is how we've always done it to a system that uses real evidence to build better tools for learning. So the big takeaway here is pretty simple, but it's also pretty powerful. When we apply this kind of scientific rigor to the tools we use in education, we end up creating a system that's more effective and more equitable for every single student. It's about using data to make sure everyone gets a fair shot.
We spend all this time talking about a test, but it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if every system we rely on, the ones that decide futures and open doors, was put under this same kind of microscope and examined this carefully for fairness? Imagine what other problems we could find, and more importantly, what we could fix. Thanks for tuning in.